Pfeiffer. He's not intimidating at all. Very nice chap. As a background, head of Disney for Asia, head of Sony, former head of Sony and former Disney, founder, chairman of Globalgate Entertainment, that is somehow connected with Lionsgate for sure. I think they are the reason why we see international films in our TVs that do not come from the country or not Hollywood. But I think, William, you understood what it means to be global from a very strong perspective. And that's what we're going to discuss here. What does that mean for the industry of filmmakers being global? It's a very much privilege, and it's a very big disadvantage that we're not really backed with mics for you guys, but for online, we are. So big applause, please, for William.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
You've been ahead of the curve for decades. I think the existence of Globalgate Entertainment is because you saw the industry evolving. And there have been a lot of talks around parasites, like, how come like a Korean movie took the stage and it's been unseen so far. So, my question, looking at the industry today, how would you define the opportunity for local language content compared to 20 years ago?
Yeah. I think 20 years ago, local content was slightly marginalized on a global scale. It was focused really on its own individual country, sometimes with distribution outside of that country to the diaspora of people from that country. But the big shift in the last 20 years, as we all know, has been the advance of streamers, the proliferation of data through the World Wide Web, and the access to knowledge from social media, and the localization of movies, both through the improvements in dubbing and subtitling, as well as the kind of push of the Hollywood players and some of the larger international players to enter into different markets. So, we've been at the forefront of that. As was mentioned, I sort of started the local content initiatives of both Disney and Sony Pictures worldwide because, before I started doing local content for them in the 80s and 90s, they weren't in that business. And then we started getting into television channels really in the 90s. So I've launched 30 TV channels around the world that were very local, and including the Sony channels in India, which are, a massive local business that 30 years ago, I thought we could go after a thin sliver of the market and compete among the Hollywood majors when I was at Sony Pictures, which is Columbia TriStar, a Hollywood studio. So why compete in that little sliver of the pie when the whole rest of the pie was the local business? So we didn't know the market, but it was just starting to open up to foreign advertising, and you had the growth of the TV channels. So we started launching TV channels, making local content for those markets, and that proved to be very successful, and we were able to compete with the local players in that market and all around Asia with Chinese content and Japanese content. And then, I think what we're doing now with Globalgate is taking some of the best stories from these individual markets and adapting them, making them in other countries with our local partners. We have 15 partners around the world who are all first-class production distribution companies. Lionsgate is our partner in the US. They own 25% of our company, but we have shareholders like Televisa from Mexico and Nordisk from Scandinavia and others. And we have these great partners with whom we produce films and series with, including TF1 in France and RAI in Italy and Lotte in Korea, Rakuten in Japan. These are all big players with whom we co-produce, co-finance content, and then we're able to bring that content out around the world, both through the infrastructure of our partners, as well as the expanding infrastructure from streamers and other local platforms around the world. The idea being that we bring intellectual property from other parts of the world. We control access to over 27,000 titles, and from that we can find ones that are culturally adaptable, relevant, universal enough in their themes to be made in other countries. So that's part of what Globalgate is doing at the moment, sort of taking that progression of hyper-local to something that's local language, but is also potentially appealing outside of its own market.
So it's very interesting. Like, I had a script prepared, but like, I didn't have the answers to know how to move with the script. So, I mean, the world has evolved, and there's the streamers, and right now the capabilities to produce a movie have increased, that it's not so hard to reach. And with that, how, I'm thinking of like the traditional funnel of movie that is considered international, or that it's from a local country, like it's dedicated for a local audience. How can it travel globally? What is that funnel looking like with everything that we have in today's infrastructure?
Yeah.
And how can it travel faster if it can?
Yes, I think, first of all, the human experience is similar for all of us in its core. We all love our parents and our children, and we all fall in love and get hurt by love, and many of life's experiences are universal. Cultural differences are there, but the things that travel are authentic stories with strong characters, with extreme situations that happen to enough people, or that might happen to enough people, or enough people can imagine happening, that they are curious to listen and stay with the story, whether it's a film or a series, to its conclusion. And you need to hook in audiences with something that catches their interest. And so that's where you need universal themes and strong characters. I think, production values are very important. And the reason that Hollywood content traveled around the world, in the past so well, was not because people were that fascinated with American culture, but because there were high production values, because you had enough of a domestic market with enough revenue that justified spending a lot of money on good scripts by good writers with good actors, good production values, audio, visual, all the technology, and that gave Hollywood an advantage. But that's no longer their advantage, and that's become much more through the advances of technology, the democratization of new technologies, and the advances in markets all around the world for shooting, and all of the companies here at Cannes are trying to find new places to shoot, and many of these countries are trying to attract production in their countries. So all of the activity that is happening here at Cannes leads to more of a global outlook. Franchises like James Bond have been shooting around the world for decades, and more productions are happening from places like India and China outside of their markets, and that, I think, makes the audiences open up to things that are happening around the world. And now I think people are just much more culturally curious than they were before. So people want to know what's happening in Korea, and they'll watch Squid Games or any of these kinds of money heist things that are happening in other countries that they can relate to, that are well produced, that are no longer, there's no longer a gap between production values of one country to another. And I think with the quality of dubbing and subtitling, and now with enhancements from AI going forward, you're going to see a lot more of a globalization of content, where things that are made in one country are going to be watched in other countries, because you're going to not have that sort of funny gap between the mouth moving and the dubbing, coming in with a foreign language that we all used to laugh about with the Hong Kong Chinese martial arts films, which I've done a lot of, in my life. And, so I mean, when we did Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which was still the biggest hit, as a foreign language film in the U.S., we spent about $2 million on getting the dubbing right. We had Michelle Yeoh do her own voice, but we had to bring in other actors for the others. But we were very careful about, how to match the mouth movement with the dialogue of the dub, and it was difficult and expensive. Now you can do that through technology to make the match and the throat and the voice of the actor in a different language, through the AI technology, be their voice, but speaking a different language, which they could never do. And the technologies like that are only going to get better over time, so that there is not a gap between, the foreign sort of production, original production, and the way people are watching it. It's going to feel very local. When I was living in Tokyo and running Disney for Asia, I remember, and I'm fluent in Japanese, and I'd come to Los Angeles and I'd hear like little kids, and at the LAX airport, Los Angeles airport, you'd have a Disney store, and the little Japanese kids behind me, I remember, that were 5 or 6, saying to their parents, they'd go, oh, in Japanese, they'd say, oh, look, they have Disney, they have Mickey Mouse here, also in America. They didn't, to them, it wasn't American, it was their Japanese Mickey Mouse, right? Because the dubs on animation can look quite close compared to humans, and kids aren't as, sort of sensitive to the movements of the mouth and the language. So that is going to happen more and more. So it's the gaps that were there to prevent good quality content from even small market productions will no longer be there. And it's going to make the world a much more rich place, because we'll be learning about different cultures and peoples without that feeling that you're kind of being treated as a second-class viewer because you're watching something that's not in your own native language.
Actually, that's true, because you said about Mickey Mouse, I'm like, to which country? Like, Mickey Mouse doesn't have nationality per se. So it's like, to who does it belong? You can really open waters. And I mean, very interesting what you said, because, MasterCard was here before, and they do have a line of business that it's about connecting the world through payments, yet Christina mentioned that like most of the world, it's not banked, and the unbanked people are going to be banked right now with all these payment solutions that are coming, which means they can consume. But I think entertainment takes first line on connecting the world globally, maybe Globalgate doesn't take the stage as much as it should for unlocking that, connecting the world through entertainment. I'm not sure if the audience just need to empathize, but as you said, it's like you don't want to see more of the same. Person that has access to a phone and Google and internet, it's the only thing in between knowledge and its situation is willingness. Do I want to know more? And if they have the means, that means they are going to get more intellectual and more curious, and they will want to see what is unexpected. How that, through your career, have you seen your audience increasing the demand? And would Globalgate Entertainment, if it would have to be founded today again, would you have thought of it completely different, considering how in the last 20 years we've connected with each other? Netflix took the online stage, and Amazon and the streaming itself. How would you think of the whole thing? And is it that the audience all of a sudden behave and ask for different things?
I mean, I remember I was in Fortune magazine a few years ago where they sort of talked of me as a purveyor of pop culture, because I was bringing Disney to Nepal, all these corners of the world. And as a world traveler, backpacker when I was young, I love the uniqueness of all the different countries and bringing MTV, Channel V, HBO, all these channels to places. I felt like maybe I was invading those cultures and they weren't going to be as unique as they had been in the past. And I don't think personally I felt that good about it because I loved the differences. But I realized that, it was going to happen inevitably because of technology, that cultures would spread and that you had people in those places that had never seen foreign content. And, all of a sudden they're watching MTV and people are wearing baseball hats and showing, their bodies with different clothes because they watch their favorite music artist or movies wearing certain things. And you feel maybe that's not the best direction for culture in the future, but the world in another way, because of this technology, is becoming closer and closer together, where we are able to understand each other, we are able to interact and relate and have relationships with each other that are meaningful and beautiful. And, so in the same way, going forward, as the world is enhanced by technology, some people are going to resist the flow of content development from the traditional writers and actors and crews. When we're all looking at what's happening now with AI, it's something that at the same time I don't feel great about it because all of my career and my friends and my life has been very much built by human talent. But if this is where everybody in the world is going, you have to embrace it in a certain way, at a certain level, and help bring better and more stories to more people around the world that they can relate to, and hopefully bring the world closer together in understanding, because ultimately the best use of technology is to give a message to people that elevates them, that uplifts them, and that brings people closer together, that breaks down barriers to help, fight against the silos and the separation that we're seeing in some parts of the world, United States included, sadly. And so, my hope is that we take the best of the traditional, combine it with the best of the technology, and bring the world together. From a strategic point of view, as a company, I would say, we started off, I've done sort of almost 30,000 hours of film and television in my life through the various, channels and businesses. The trends going forward, in addition to all that stuff, I would spend more time probably on developing, global series that are adaptable across many territories. I would focus on territories like, I think South Asia, India specifically, I think is set for more globalization. Southeast Asia, Indonesia is a massive market with a lot of talent. In the Middle East, we're expanding into the Middle East. These are areas of interest for us. And certainly Africa is a place where I haven't spent as much time in the past because we've been focusing on the top 20 markets around the world. But I think there's fascinating stories and interesting markets there. I would say technology is something that I'm embracing and digging deep into around the world, and there's certainly the utilization of technology from some of the places that I go to, because I travel very often, is felt well beyond what it is even in the United States in some way, the integration of these technologies. And so combining, those international technologies, those markets with, universal themes, culturally relevant, authentic characters, bringing more actors from some markets to others, to bring the talent out around the world, both in front of the camera and behind the camera, is very important to me, to try to give opportunities for more people and training more and more of the upcoming young people, because there's so much incredible talent around the world that needs an opportunity. So I think those are things that are exciting, because you're seeing a lot of content now that's being made, user-generated content, where influencers are now getting into the game, and they're smart, fascinating people in every sector. And I look into the eyes of young people and listen to their stories and their dreams, and that's in all corners of the world, and I think that's very inspiring. And I would say that that's where the future of global entertainment is going. It's this globalization, local and global combined in a new way that's fresh, beautiful stories, beautiful people, beautiful technology, and that I'm very excited about that.
So as a wrap up, I think we discussed from how things look like from the industry perspective, but looking outside the industry, how does it look like for the audience? What does it mean actually for them, the next chapter of global entertainment? Being more intellectual. Like it's very, I think having the data of how your audience reacts towards your content or your film because as you mentioned, influencers, they do have all that and they only get better and better because they have access to that. So in that space, what the audience should be expecting from the next 10 years when it comes to entertainment?
Clearly, the availability of screens everywhere is only going to be, accelerated, exacerbated, improved. Virtual reality goggles, glasses that you can watch movies in with perfect sound and visual, just without a big to heavy device, is the future. I love the collective experience of the theater. I hope that never goes away. I only want it to be improved with other enhancements to movements in the seats and smells in the audience that are good. And, I think the visual all around, I was just at the Sphere in Las Vegas. I saw U2, I saw the Grateful Dead. The sound, the picture quality is just incredible. And it's only going to get better as a communal experience with thousands of people experiencing the same thing. And what was amazing was, and this is just 2 weeks ago, very few people pulled out their phones because it was just so all-encompassing and a phone couldn't capture any of this. There's a 360 dome with sound everywhere and visual everywhere with a band playing and pictures that are telling stories. And there's, going to be a lot more of that around the world, and not just in your own little world, but communally. And so I think that's exciting. I think the balance is going to be, and I have two wonderful sons, you don't want them spending too much time in any one space. I think the future of education is using the technologies and the screens, but with a very balanced education of what you're using it for. Learning, entertainment, kind of horizon expanding through visual, audio, and stories. But you still want people to read. You've got to be able to read. You've got to be able to write and write with a pencil, because we all know that the data says, the research says that writing with your hand and on a piece of paper develops certain parts of the brain and creates certain skill sets and knowledge that you can't get just by reading or typing off a screen. And so, I just hope that the educational balance is there so that people aren't just totally locked in their own world and, sort of isolated. I think the communal experience and the individual experience enhanced by technology is something that I hope the psychologists and the educators have a better handle on than they do today, because there is going to be incredible opportunities to just explore and go very deep into parts of the world and the universe alone that are amazing, that I encourage and want to experience. But at the same time, we are humans, we are animals, and we're social creatures, and we need each other and need to understand each other. So that balance is what I hope they're able to achieve through technology and storytelling.
I said is the last question, but it's actually not. It's always like another song. And it's like, so it's true. One of the things fascinate me the most about internet is that has create this balance where it's not you just consume and spend, and the technology is giving you ways to also create and earn and sell on your own as an individual. Like So when that comes into an equilibrium, I like what you said before. It's like don't just consume. Take a pen and pencil and create. Yeah. And if that is becoming more and more, then better stories might emerge, right? Because everybody might have a voice, and today we have means to have a voice. So I'm I'm really interested of understanding, like, did you feel Cannes different, or based on the time, considering like how many festivals you've been attending and having been in the industry for so long and in so many different countries, do you feel like in the past years, or my question is more rooted to Cannes, is there something different that like it's taking taglines happening and it's really defining a different year for such festival than there are others?
That's a good question. You know, I think what's interesting is the democratization of content creation, where there are so many technologies available inexpensively that allow people to make content who couldn't do it before. It was a studio system before, controlled by big companies who had access to the cameras, the sound, the studio system, the talent, and now anybody can make content with their phones or cameras, and that's a wonderful thing. There is so much out there. To be able to find it is a challenge, and to be able to access it, to be able to get out of that traditional distribution system is, I think, something that we're seeing, and something that I have to applaud Olyn for, is enabling filmmakers, people who own film, to access audiences around the world without the middleman, without that bottleneck of the traditional distribution system. And I think that is a beautiful thing that you guys are pioneering in the best way, that is going to enable all those people who are making great content but can't really find their audiences, have a chance. Because the best should get through. It shouldn't be controlled by the big companies. In the music business, it was always whoever the big music labels wanted to push, they would push it, and that's what they would put in the stores and put on the radios, and the concerts would only be those artists that they wanted to support. And now you're finding all kinds of amazing artists that are just making their videos, recording their music, putting it on YouTube or whatever outlet online, for videos, and also just the music platforms. So that's happening there. And now I think you guys are leading the charge in allowing movies and series, audiovisual content to go out and reach the people without that filter, and then for them to be able to actually make some money from it. Whereas before, the labels in the music analogy, a lot of the economics were taken by the labels, and there wasn't that much, even for the big artists, in the old days, until they started renegotiating, getting their power back. And so, hopefully now, going forward, that people who are creating good content will be able to monetize their creativity, and they'll be able to justify the time spent, because there'll be some reward for it. And when there is a good response from the market, and you're able to monetize it and make some money, you'll be encouraged to make more and put more effort into it and put more resources. So you'll get a snowballing of content creation, of creativity, that is not hamstrung and restricted and handcuffed by the traditional distribution. And so you're going to have a lot more interesting out there content that you can't even imagine by creative minds that are unhampered. And it could go in very interesting directions, and I'm very excited about the future of the audiences in small and different places around the world making amazing stuff that you'll be able to find in your country on the other side of the world, because of Olyn and others that are bringing it out there to the people in the most direct way.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the future is fascinating for in the industry. I think, William, you have been really deep into your answering, and I'm really grateful for it. I wasn't expecting so much juice into everything you said, because truly, I think people that are into entertainment take for granted the job they're doing and how much it means to bring people global, to connect with brands, to address to their audiences. And we're seeing some new trends emerging, like Mr. Beast and, like others building their own momentum. We do think at Olyn also that do not just monetize, just like tease people and show data before presenting yourself to a streamer or try to make sense to deal with a distributor that is interested in your content. And if you have that data, not only the distributor or the streamer can have more sense on where to channel it, but this is what keeps us busy. At the same time, I think, as you said, the new and the old must come together, and not as the old, just like the traditional way of doing things. So, William, I'm just giving you the mic for the last advice you might have for anybody who's in the industry right now, trying to do a movie or trying to find for a distributor. What do you suggest on their career and where they should be heading towards? But nonetheless, I'm not gonna extend it further because these guys are gonna give me the time up very soon. And also, I know you're very busy, but this is an important conversation, and I've been seeing thank you for the 5,000 people joining on YouTube and Instagram Live. So that mix was very awkward, as we don't see you, but we feel you. And any questions you guys had? I know not from the audience, it hasn't been the style for. But we will maybe do another live or podcast online addressing all those questions for you guys. So keep tuned and hear the advice William must say. And afterwards, a big applause for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. It's, I think knowledge is power. Data is power. One of the things that's really happening now is that, we're able to understand really the audiences better because of the efforts of Olyn and others, whereas before, what was happening with your own shows or movies on places like Netflix, you really didn't know. But I think going forward, that data is going to be much more available. People will demand it, enforce it. And what I would say is that in terms of making stories, it's all got to come from the heart. Just keep telling stories. Don't give up your dreams in terms of getting into the entertainment industry, because it can be daunting. There are people who care. There are good people who want to tell stories. Pick the people very carefully. It's all about finding partners who have experience, cross-border experience around the world. Find honest, good people, and be honest and decent yourself, and just be kind to each other. Those old days of the intimidating kind of approach to business and being hard, I think we've seen has led to some good changes because nobody likes that. Just go forward with a good heart, kindness, be open-minded and accepting of people from other countries, and I hope you'll have great success, and I look forward to what you're going to create for the future. Thank you for having me. This has been a great pleasure.
I'll do the yoo-hoo for online. Thank you, William, and thank you, everybody. If anybody has questions, I'm not sure, but you can chase. That's all this is about, I can't. So thank you, everyone.